Welcome back to the Titans Debate League. I'm your host, King James. For centuries, the Hebrew Bible stood as a sea of consonants, a skeleton of text waiting for the breath of life. In the early Middle Ages, the Masorites of Tiberias took it upon themselves to provide that breath. They developed a sophisticated system of dots and dashes in the coup, designed to lock in the correct pronunciation forever. But today we step into the crossfire of a fundamental question. What is written versus what is read? Did the Masorites faithfully capture an unbroken ancient oral tradition? Or did they impose a new phonetic layer onto a text that had already evolved? Today we peel back the layers of the continued course and ask the ultimate question for any textual scholars. Did the Masorites get it right? Our debaters are ready, so let's get into the heart of the Tiberian tradition.
It ain't no love for your brother. It ain't no love for your sister. It ain't no love for no junkie. It ain't no love for the pusher. It ain't no love for the honest. It ain't no love for the real. It ain't no love for the loyal. Looking for love, get you killed. Filthy is what you gotta get. You gotta get dirty if you're trying to get rich. It's back to the mud, cause you gotta show love to all of the ones who will never see this. To all the little kids with no Christmas list. No TV, no bed, and no food on they dish. No father around, now they malnourished. That hindering aid coming from the government. You gotta get filthy. Fuck a job, open up a business. Haters gon' watch when you kill shit. Every murder case got a witness. Whole block going through the blues. Coming from the bottom, do you feel it? Cause being broke leave a hole in your soul. Put your fists in the air, black folk, if you feel me. I say I came from the bottom, no lights, no gas. You can get robbed, no pipe, no mask. Throw a tea party, don't invite your ass. Now your belly got tissue to wipe your ass. It ain't no love from the government. Every president been on some sucker shit. Young niggas busting shit, no, I'm not loving it. This is the option they stuck me with. Grind hard till I'm filled it.
Peace, Titans family. So today we're going to dive into the Masorites and the Masoretic text and their system of Nakus, their Tiberian vocalization. Right? We're gonna look and see if over 1,000 years later, if they got it right. Right? We're gonna look at what was actually written versus their vocalization system of Nakus. And we're gonna look at how that vocalization system may have actually changed the meaning of what was actually written. So we're going to look at this. We're going to look at it linguistically. And we're going to see what the scholars say. And then we're going to look at the primary sources ourselves. And then we're going to go over it. And I'm going to open up the panel. And I'm going to let you guys jump on and I'm going to critique. Here we go.
No Jewish rabbi ever revealed how to pronounce the name. We only know it from the manuscripts of the Bible. I taught that. The rabbis did know, and how do I know they knew? Because in the Talmud, when it says you're not allowed to speak the name, it also says that rabbis would teach the name to their disciples once every 7 years.
So they knew it, but they were not saying it.
They were saying it in secret once every 7 years as part of some ceremony of transmitting the name so the knowledge wouldn't be lost.
Yeah.
Now, where did Yahweh? Ooh, that's interesting.
Welcome back to another episode of the Covenant and Conflict podcast. With us again, Nehemiah Gordon. We're so glad you're here.
Thank you. Shalom. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming back. I know we joked that we might have been wearing the same things the last time we filmed, but this is not the same day. That we're not pulling a wool over your eyes. This is a new day. And when you came last time, I said, I think before we were recording, I said, I really want you to come back and speak on the name of the Lord. And you said it's one of my favorite topics.
It is my favorite topic, probably. Definitely one of my top 3.
And so now we have the time, because I wanted people to get to know you. We talked about you being a Karaite and what that means. We talked about the Hebrew Yeshua versus the Greek Jesus, the Hebrew Matthew. But now we have some time allotted to talk about the name of God. It's a pretty big deal, right?
It's a really important deal. So in the Hebrew Bible, what Christians call the Old Testament, we have the name of God appears 6,827 times.
Wow.
And what I mean by the name of God, in Hebrew, it's the 4 letters, Yud, He, Vav, He.
Yeah.
What some people call the Tetragrammaton, or literally the 4-letter name.
Yeah.
And just to contrast there, the word God, which in Hebrew is Elohim, is another word for God, El. And there's another term, Adonai, which is Lord. And then there's like El Shaddai, which is usually translated God Almighty. If you take all those are titles, take them all together, they don't amount to the number of times that his actual name appears.
Wow.
And that's kind of mind-blowing that his name appears, the name Yud He Vav He appears probably at least twice as many times as all of the other titles combined.
Yeah.
And what's so powerful for me as a Jew about that name is that, first of all, when Moses says to God, he's like, okay, I'm going to go to the people and say, God has sent me. What name should I tell them? That's in Exodus 3. And he first answers.
Does he say what name, or does he say, who should I say sent me?
You're getting me on the spot.
Okay, I was just like, maybe I've never read it that way. But essentially he's saying, who do I say you are?
And here's the context. They're living in Egypt for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And there's thousands of gods.
Yeah.
Right? So which God in particular is sending me? The God of, which one?
Yeah.
And God responds, first of all, Ehyeh asher ehyeh, which is usually translated, I am that I am. We can get back to that.
Yeah.
That's in Exodus 3:14. And then in verse 15, he says his actual name, Yud He Vav He, which we'll talk about how that's pronounced.
Yeah.
And he says, this is my name forever. And then in many translations, it has, this is my memorial for generation to generation. But that word memorial, the Hebrew word zichri, actually is from a root that means to mention. So it means this is my name forever. This is my mention for generation to generation. When you mention me, when you call upon me in prayer and in oaths, this is the name you are to use.
Yeah.
And so that it was clearly from the very beginning intended to use that name. Now, what happened over the centuries is Jewish tradition stepped in, and there became this tradition that God's name is too holy to speak. And so instead of calling on the actual name, Jews started using these replacements, these titles, right? So like the title Adonai, which means Lord. Adonai appears in the Hebrew Bible.
Yeah.
But it also it appears approximately 400 times, 434, give or take, versus 6,827 for the actual name Yud He Vav He.
Yeah.
So the intention was that we would call on his name. In fact, there's this beautiful report we have in the Mishnah, which is the writings of the ancient rabbis, where they talk about how there was a practice of ancient Israel to greet people in the name. And what does that mean, to greet them in the name? So they explain, look at what happened when Gideon encounters the angel. The angel says to him, Yehovah, that's the letters Yud He Vav He, according to the pronunciation I understand. We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
He greets him in the name of Yehovah, and he says, Yehovah be with you. And Gideon doesn't understand what that means. He thinks that's just, hey, how you doing? But what the angel really meant was, no, Yehovah is going to be with you and you're going to be powerful. And then they bring another example, which is in Ruth, where Boaz is walking on the road to Bethlehem and he sees the harvesters in the field. And they say to him, Yevarechecha Yehovah, may Yehovah bless you. And he says to them, Yehovah imachem, Yehovah be with you. Right. So that was the greeting of ancient Israel. People would greet each other in the name. And so somehow we went from greeting each other in the name to where we can't even say the name in Jewish tradition, unless we are the high priest in the temple, is what Maimonides says. And then there's this statement in the Talmud that says, well, in this world, in this fallen world, in the current state, we can't say the name, but in the world to come, and by the world to come, they don't mean heaven. They mean when the Messiah is here on earth reigning as king over the world.
Mm-hmm.
In the world to come, the name will be read the way it is written. Meaning today, whenever Jews see those letters, Yud, He, Vav, He, Yehovah, or some people will say Yahweh, we'll talk about that hopefully, they read it as Adonai, which is, as I said, another title that appears 400 and something times.
Mm-hmm.
So they see those letters Yud, He, Vav, He, and they replace them with a completely different word.
Yep.
Which I'm trying to think if there's an example like that in the English language, where you see one word and you read a completely different word. Nothing's coming to mind.
Maybe a curse word.
Maybe. There you go.
You know.
But isn't that interesting? So we have words that are so, let's say, bad that you can't say
so
them.
Profane. Yeah.
Profane. And then there's words in many cultures that are so holy you can't say them. Right? So, and this was actually a practice in many of the ancient cultures in the Middle East, that there would be a god whose name was too holy to speak.
Really?
And the Canaanites, for example, worshipped a god who we know in the Old Testament is Baal.
Yeah.
And or I think maybe some people say Baal, right?
Yeah, that's how we like to say it.
Baal just means Lord. And it's different than Adonai, which is what we use for our God.
Mm-hmm.
But that wasn't his name. What was his actual name? Well, we know his actual name from archaeology and study of ancient texts was Hadad. Which means something like thunder, right? So he was a god of thunder. He was a storm god. But the Canaanites wouldn't call him Hadad. The Arameans did, who lived in Syria. But the Canaanites said, well, that name's too holy. We're just going to call him Lord.
Wow.
Right? So what an incredible parallel that we have. Now, did they copy us or did we copy them?
And I think that's a very interesting point that he's making right there, as identifying. Because I see a lot of people make that mistake of identifying or thinking that Baal is the actual God itself, right? Not realizing that Baal is just a title, right? You make the error when you're speaking phonetically and looking to identify it phonetically, opposing to reading what is actually written. If you're reading the script and the script says Baal Hadad, right? That's identifying the deity as Hadad, and the common noun in the sentence is Baal. It's being used as a word for Lord, as a common noun. So it's not the name of the deity. So that's an argument a lot of people are going to have to stop using. And they're making the same parallel with Yehovah in this instance as well, in regards to the tetragram. So we'll let it go a little bit further.
Yeah. Right. And I'll leave that open for as a question of history.
Yeah.
But I think it was more a matter of this was a practice in many cultures, and Jews probably said something like, well, you know what, is the name of our God less holy than the name Hadad? Of course not. So we want to honor him by doing what we know other peoples do to honor their gods, by not saying his name.
Yeah.
But that's not what he said to do.
Yeah.
He said, this is my name forever. This is my mention from generation to generation.
Got it. So I brought a little whiteboard with me.
Okay.
And this is to help any of our visual listeners. If you're just listening on Spotify or something, tune into YouTube next time. Hopefully it'll be okay for them. But this is to kind of help people.
Okay.
And I want to share basically what I was taught.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want us to backtrack and say, okay, where did that come from? And what are the other perspectives essentially?
Yeah.
So hopefully the mic's still catching this up or picking everything up. So thank you, Terry, for letting us use your whiteboard. And correct me if I'm wrong in any of this. This is kind of, I think, the basic kind of Christian understanding.
Okay.
And what I was taught,
mm-hmm.
and what I think a lot of Christians kind of understand to this day. So we have the Hebrew, Yod, He, Vav, He. Good so far?
That's great.
If we were going to essentially transliterate this to English, our viewers might be familiar with YHWH. You might see it on some cool Christian hats that they sell now.
Okay.
And when most Christians see this today, at the time of this recording, they will say, "Oh, I know that. That's Yahweh."
All right.
It's become very mainstream. I think the Passion Translation, which is a popular, newer translation, actually uses Yahweh,
Okay.
and they'll actually write it out. But you'll notice you can't actually pronounce this in English. This would be, there's no vowels. And that is, if you're unfamiliar with Hebrew, there's the little dots that you see all over ancient Hebrew. Those are nikud. Is that right?
Yep.
And those are essentially the vowels. You'll see a dot here, a patach or whatever, different things to give the vowels, because they're essentially saying, we're going to add an A here. We're going to add an O up here. They're filling in the vowels. Does that make sense? Is that
Well,
tracking?
it makes sense to me. I don't know if it makes sense to the audience.
So
the story behind this is that ancient Hebrew was written with consonants,
yeah,
and the vowels were, and this is a whole complicated subject, but basically the vowels were people say, well, ancient Hebrew didn't have vowels. Of course it did. Every spoken language had vowels.
yeah,
They just weren't written down.
yeah. You just knew them.
You knew them. Well, there were people who were experts who memorized the entire Bible and were able to recite every single word precisely. For centuries, they were doing this. And then sometime around the year 600, give or take, they started writing these vowels down.
Okay.
And they did that for a number of reasons. One is they were afraid, well, we're going to forget these. And another one was Hebrew was becoming less and less spoken. So it became more and more important as Jews were spreading out around the world.
Okay. So when they started adding the nikud so that we could all understand exactly how to pronounce these names, the story that I was told as a Bible student is they didn't add the nikud to Yod He Vav He. They'd either leave the vowels essentially off, or they would add the vowels of Adonai to signal, don't say Yod He Vav He. You see these vowels of Adonai, that's because you're supposed to say Adonai. Kind of like what you referred to. The understanding that I was taught, and I think a lot of us are taught, is we didn't want to take the Lord's name in vain. That was the real kind of thrust behind it.
Yeah, that's interesting, because that's not the thrust in Jewish sources.
Really?
Meaning, so you've got the third commandment, or at least as Jews count it, the third commandment.
Yeah.
Lo tisa et shem Yehovah Elohecha lashav, ki lo yinakat asher yisa et shmo lashav. Don't take the name of Yehovah your God in vain, for he will not make clean he who takes his name in vain. The ancient Jewish understanding of that is, don't make a false oath in his name. Because the way they would make oaths is they would say, as Yehovah lives. And then they would say, as Yehovah lives, I will do X, Y, Z, or I testify to X, Y, Z. And if what you're saying is not true, you've taken his name in vain.
Yeah.
In vain means falsely.
Yeah.
And so it was a false oath. And that's the ancient Jewish understanding of that. Now, later Jews, much, much later, start to say, okay, it means to say the name without good reason. But the earlier sources don't have that at all. And I think it's ironic that that's the Christian understanding, that it's so this is okay. This is an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
But I've encountered a lot of Christians who, when they hear somebody say the word, and I'm not knocking this, I'm just saying, understand from a Jewish perspective how alien this is. They think if you say something like, oh my God, you're taking the name of the God in vain. From a Jewish perspective, that's not taking his, well, that's, first of all, it's not his name.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a title.
Yeah.
But that's taking his name means to speak it falsely. And so so I think it's interesting. Some Christians become very legalistic.
Yeah. Totally.
And say, oh no, you can't say that, and you're a bad person if you say that.
Yeah.
And Jews hear that and they're like, we have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, it reveals the lack of Jewish foundation that most of us Christians have. We've separated ourselves so aggressively from anything Jewish that when we find something that is in some ways inherently Jewish, which I think you could argue the whole Bible is inherently Jewish, but something that is maybe foreign to us, we have to kind of make up our own understanding. So all that to say, to kind of circle back, the way that I was taught, and I think a lot of Christians are taught, is the Jewish people didn't want to profane the name, whether that was tied to the third commandment or not. It was so holy. So they stopped saying it out of reverence.
Mhm.
And it seems like in later Christian traditions, we developed Jehovah,
Mhm.
and that, from the Greek, they didn't have the y sound, they had the j sound.
Well, Greek doesn't. Well, so where the J came from is that so Martin Luther, he translates the Bible into German, and
Mhm.
then the English versions are based on this German. And in German, the J was pronounced y, and actually in English it was pronounced y as well.
Mm.
Like if you look at the original 1611 King James version,
Yeah.
and this is interesting. When I say the original, people are like, "Oh, I went to Bible Hub and I got the King James." Well, that's not the one from 1611.
Okay.
And the differences aren't major, but there are some
Yeah.
differences. University of Pennsylvania has a high resolution scan online of the original 1611, and there you can see the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh usually is translated as Lord in all caps,
Mhm.
but 7 times it's written, actually I believe it's 6 times it's written Jehovah, and 1 time it's written Yehovah with an I. Now, as far as I know, and I'm not an expert in English, I can barely speak the language, all 7 times they would have pronounced that something like Yehovah.
Mm.
And that was because they understood that first letter in Hebrew was a y.
Yeah.
Over time, the pronunciation of that letter changed, right? So the same text in English was then pronounced differently.
Yeah.
But in German to this day, if you were to write Jehovah, Jehovah, they would pronounce it Yehovah.
Yeah. Well, and it's weird that we pronounce it, Israel
Instead of Yisrael, right?
or Jisrael, because if
Yeah.
we're gonna take the y and make it a j.
Well, so this is interesting. There's a place in the Bible called Jezreel,
Yeah.
and there's another place in the Bible called Israel. And in Hebrew, one is Yisrael and the other is Yisrael,
Mm.
right? They're both ye,
Yeah.
but one for some reason became a J and the other became an I.
Yeah. And then we added the S at the end of Jesus because all Greek names end with S, right? Or like the Augustus,
Not all
Octavius,
names, but
Julius.
you have names like, well, this is an interesting example. We have the Jewish historian Josephus,
Yeah.
which is in Greek Josephus, but in Hebrew it's Yosef. So
Yeah.
where'd the us come from? Because that's the style of names in Greek ending in us. Maybe not all names, but many names
Yeah.
end in us.
Okay.
And so Yeshua, which was the Hebrew name of what became Jesus, in
Yeah.
Greek was, well, the Greeks didn't have a sh sound, so Yeshua, and they didn't have the ayin sound either. So
Yeah.
that became Yesu and then Jesus.
Yeah.
And for example, Joshua, the son of Nun,
Yeah.
in the ancient Greek translation of the Old Testament, what's called the Septuagint,
Yeah.
the Torah portion was translated around 250 BCE in Egypt when they were making the Library of Alexandria. That's a story anyway.
Mm.
It's more or less probably true. And there they write Joshua's name, which in Hebrew is Yehoshua. They write it as Jesus.
Yeah.
Right. So there's actually no difference between Jesus in Greek and Joshua in Greek.
Yeah.
And in Hebrew, actually, there's no difference. Right. So
Yeah.
Joshua, the son of Nun, in the book of Nehemiah is called Yeshua, the son of Nun, which is the same name as Jesus.
Yeah. Would have
Right,
been
just
deliverer,
it's a
right?
truncated form. Well, it means this is interesting, important, related to the name,
Yeah.
right? Because some Christians will be like, "What do I need to know that name for? It's not important." Well, in John 17, Jesus said that he came to one of the things he did is he manifested the name of his Father.
Yeah.
He says in 17:6, and then in at the end in 26 of this prayer, he says he made known his Father's name. Well, what is his Father's name, and what does that mean? Well, the name Jesus, Yeshua, which is short for Yehoshua, means Yehovah Yoshia, Yehovah saves.
Mm.
And many Hebrew names are contractions of short sentences.
Yeah.
Right. So my name, Nehemiah, means Yehovah comforts.
Mm-hmm.
And the name Yehoshua, Joshua, or Jesus, Yeshua means Yehovah saves.
Yeah.
So, he talks about coming in his Father's name, and people are like, well, what does that mean? Or maybe they think they know what it means.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what the Father's name is,
Mm.
you're kind of missing, I feel like you're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. So when we're taught it was out of reverence that the Jewish community would stop saying
that's
it.
correct. Meaning, let's say today, if you walked up to a rabbi and you said, I know the name of God is really Yahweh, well, many rabbis would have no idea what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But if you said, some will, and they'll say, please don't say that name. we don't speak that name. Please don't speak it in my presence.
Yeah.
If you said, I know God's name is really Yehovah, most Jews will know what you're talking about because that's what they see written in their text,
Yeah.
even if they don't pronounce it. And it'll offend many Jews, absolutely. And I don't think you
Yeah.
should be offending people, right? I'm Jewish and I speak the name, and you can say it around me.
Yeah.
But I don't think we should be stuffing this down, people's throats who don't want to hear it.
And we've had to talk to people because in the Christian culture right now, Yahweh is a big deal, and it's very much being clung to as this is the real name. We have the name, and so more and more songs are being made that are Yahweh, and we have many Jewish members at our church, and we try to help our Gentile friends like, hey, that can be a little bit offensive. It can take them away from whatever they're experiencing in the service and now make them focus on, oh my goodness, that was kind of jarring. So my first question is, was that the original reason why, or were they told that they were not allowed to pronounce it?
This is complicated because it gets into periods of history where we don't have all the answers. Here's what we know. There's a rabbi in the Talmud named Hanina ben Teradion. He's sometime around the year 135, 136. He's put to death by the Romans in a really brutal way. And the rabbis in the Talmud are trying to find out. They're discussing, they're debating. Everything in the Talmud is debates.
Yeah.
Right? It's this dialogue that went on for about 5 centuries.
Yeah.
And they're asking the question, why was he so brutally executed? And one of their explanations is, well, he used to speak the name the way it is written. What does that mean? The way it is? How else would you speak it?
Yeah.
Well, so the tradition by that time, by 135, 136 AD, was when you see the letters Yud He Vav He, you pronounce it Adonai, Lord. You don't pronounce it the way it's written. And the tradition was, in the world to come, when the Messiah is reigning here on earth, we'll speak it the way it's written. They didn't think that would be 2,000 years later, and we'd still be waiting for the Messiah to reign as king on earth, as a flesh and blood king over the world, with world peace, as Isaiah 2 describes.
Yeah.
They probably thought it would be a few years.
Yeah.
As a longer.
It's a big deal. And it's very much being clung to as this is the real name. We have the name, and so more and more songs are being made that are Yahweh, and we have many Jewish members at our church, and we try to help our Gentile friends like, hey, that can be a little bit offensive. It can take them away from whatever they're experiencing in the service and now make them focus on, oh my goodness, that was kind of jarring. So my first question is, was that the original reason why, or were they told that they were not allowed to pronounce it?
This is complicated because it gets into periods of history where we don't have all the answers. Here's what we know. There's a rabbi in the Talmud named Hanina ben Teradion. He's sometime around the year 135, 136. He's put to death by the Romans in a really brutal way. And the rabbis in the Talmud are trying to find out. They're discussing, they're debating. Everything in the Talmud is debates.
Yeah.
Right? It's this dialogue that went on for about 5 centuries.
Yeah.
And they're asking the question, why was he so brutally executed? And one of their explanations is,
And I find that very interesting right there. I think this is a very crucial point. So he's saying at this point, at about 135 AD, this particular rabbi is put to death. And the reason or explanation that is given for this rabbi being put to death so brutally is that he spoke the word the way that it was actually written. That's very important, because at this point there is no Nakud system. There is no Nakud. There is no Tiberian vocalization. And he's punished. He's murdered for speaking it the way it was written. So when we ask ourselves about this Tiberian vocalization system that's written within the Nakud system, that's vocalized not how it's written, for the mere fact that we can interchange vowels, create different words from the same skeleton. Lets you know. That's very interesting. That's a very interesting point, I thought. Let's continue.
Well, he used to speak the name the way it is written. What does that mean? The way it is. How else would you speak it?
Yeah.
Well, so the tradition by that time, by 135, 136 AD, was when you see the letters Yud He Vav He, you pronounce it Adonai, Lord. You don't pronounce it the way it's written. And the tradition was, in the world to come, when the Messiah is reigning here on earth, we'll speak it the way it's written. They didn't think that would be 2,000 years later, and we'd still be waiting for the Messiah to reign as king on earth, as a flesh and blood king over the world, with world peace, as Isaiah 2 describes.
Yeah.
They probably thought it would be a few years, as longer than they thought. So what we learned from that is, wait a minute, there's Jews in the 2nd century AD who are speaking the name the way it is written. And these rabbis are saying, well, in this case, that led to him being executed in a very bad way, or a very brutal way. And so first of all, you can take away from that it was unusual in the 2nd century.
Yeah.
But there were people who were still doing it and remembered how to pronounce it. And then they go into all kinds of complicated explanations. I don't want to get into too much detail.
Yeah.
But basically, the name was being abused by Jews for magical purposes. And they say, well, he had to speak it because people use the name in magic. And how do you know what magic is if you've never heard the name? Right? If you mispronounce the name in magic, it doesn't have any effect. So this rabbi was teaching his students, if you hear somebody say it in this way, don't worry about it. That's not really the name. But if you hear him say it this way, they've sinned, and you should condemn that.
Yeah.
So so we learned that, wait a minute, okay, there's Jews who are abusing it in magic, and there's rabbis who are saying it, but only in a very limited context of teaching people what magic sounds like, so you don't do it.
Yeah.
And then we have a statement in the Mishnah where it says all Jews have a portion in the world to come. And again, for the rabbis of the Mishnah, the world to come isn't heaven.
Yeah.
It's here on earth.
Yeah. It's a restored earth, essentially.
It's a restored, it's a new heaven and new earth in the resurrection, something like that in rabbinical thought.
Yeah.
Under the reign of the King Messiah, who's a flesh and blood king, descended from David.
Yep.
And some people will have a portion in that world and some won't. And they say all Jews have a portion in the world to come, except the following. And then there's a list of exceptions. And one of those exceptions in the Mishnah is those who pronounce the name according to its letters. Meaning by the time that was written, probably in the 2nd century AD, that portion of the Mishnah, or certainly based on the names of the people, it's Rabbi Akiva's mentioned there, and people we know who lived around, who were killed by the Romans during the Hadrianic persecutions.
Yeah.
Right. So around the year 135. So by that time, there is this idea you shouldn't speak the name the way it's written because you'll forfeit your portion in the world to come. But if you look at the context in which they're saying that, it's specifically in the context of magic.
Got it.
So this, right, later it's expanded to any speaking the name the way it is written. But the original context was, if someone is wounded, they would speak the verse, I am Yehovah, your healer. And that's where they say one who speaks the name the way it is written has no portion in the world to come, in saying that as sort of like an incantation. Right? Which is interesting because Christians heal in the name today, many Christians.
Yeah.
But from the perspective of the rabbis in the 2nd century, if you heal in the name Yud He Vav He, that it can be a prayer, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it can also be a magical incantation, and that's forbidden according to the Torah as they understood it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So at the foundation, it's
to respect the name from people who they perceived as abusing.
But it wasn't
reasons.
necessarily outside persecution like
there was
Romans.
Also outside persecution, right?
Okay.
I mean, part of the Hadrianic persecutions was, look, I don't know if your audience knows who Hadrian. He was the most evil Roman emperor who ever lived, and he wanted to stamp out Judaism. So here's what you need to understand: Jews in the Roman Empire had what you could call in Christian terms a special dispensation. And what did that mean? That meant everybody, to show you're a loyal citizen of the Roman Empire, needs to bring a sacrifice to the emperor.
Yeah.
Not for the emperor, to the emperor who is a god. And the Romans conquer or they take over Judea. They finagle their way in 63 BCE under Pompey, and then they gradually get more and more control over Israel. And they realize these people won't do it. And they're a good source of taxation. So we have two choices. We can kill them all, or we can make a special exemption for them.
Mm-hmm.
And the special exemption was, okay, you don't have to bring a sacrifice to the emperor. You can bring one for the emperor to your God.
Because the Jews would probably rather die than
they were dying.
Yeah.
And so they realized, okay, you guys just fought a war under the Maccabees against the Greeks. We see where this is going. The Romans, we just want the taxes and we want loyalty.
Yeah.
And if you can't bring a sacrifice to the emperor, you can bring one for the emperor. Okay.
Yeah.
But no other people were allowed to do that. And this is where Christians ended up being persecuted. When Christians were Jews, they were fine.
Yeah.
Right? They would say to them, okay, bring a sacrifice to the emperor. I can't. I'm a Jew. Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, I believe in Jesus. I'm not a Jew. Okay, well, then you're going to die.
Yeah. So a Gentile that
who became a Christian had two choices: bring a sacrifice to the emperor or get executed.
Yeah, because there was no exemption.
There was no Jew exemption for them.
Yeah.
So they're like, oh, this is not good. And that a lot of the persecutions were over that.
Yeah.
Not all of them. It became more complicated, right?
Yeah.
Being a Christian itself eventually was enough to get you persecuted.
Yeah.
But initially it was just really simple. If you're a Jew, you get an exemption. If you're not, you get executed or you bring the sacrifice. That's all you got to do. And the Gentile Christians, they kind of were like, no, we're a new category. Well, there's no new categories. We didn't agree to that, the Romans say. So Hadrian comes along and he says, look, this Jewish exemption, we got to do away with that. Enough. And why is it they can't just worship? They can worship
So what did he just say? And I'll go back to it. Because that's a point for somebody who's arguing with salvation for the Gentiles as well. Because no, it wasn't. Either your ass was a Jew, or your ass need to bring a sacrifice, or your ass was getting out of there. So that's a key point for somebody who wants to argue that side of the debate. Was salvation for the Jews? Yes or no? I would say it's only for the Jews. Let's go. Not even for the Christian Gentiles.
the God. We have no problem with that. But they have to worship our gods as well. Right. And in the pagan mindset, that made perfect sense. Right. There's lots of gods.
Yeah.
Right. The Romans
another one.
In Rome had temples to, Egyptian gods and Persian gods. And right. We're honoring all the gods. We're very respectful.
Yeah.
Well, but from the Jewish and the Christian perspective, that's not respectful. That's sacrilegious.
Yeah.
So Hadrian comes along and institutes all these measures to get Jews to stop being different, basically.
Mm-hmm.
That he just wanted them to assimilate.
Yep.
And sacrifices to him
yeah.
and to his gods to show their loyalty. And one of the persecutions we're told is that the Romans forbade speaking the name.
Okay.
Right. So you have this convergence of two. There's an internal factor that people are abusing it in magic or what Jews considered magic and healing and things like that. And then the external factor is Roman persecution. And the rabbis said, well, we'll do it in the world to come. That'll be like 3 years from now, right? I mean, 50 years.
They're like,
from
we
now.
got to be close.
Right.
Yeah.
We're definitely close.
Yeah.
Right. And there were good reasons they thought it was close.
Yeah.
Meaning from their perspective.
Totally.
And well, it turned out that didn't happen the way that we thought.
And that happened in early Christianity as well. I think the New Testament authors were like, it's got to be like in a couple of weeks,
famously, Paul is struggling with this idea of the dead in Christ, right? Which people who have died before Jesus came back.
Yeah.
And people are like, what's going on? We thought it was going to be really soon.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't what we signed up for.
Yeah.
And he's, there's some profound teachings he has there, like, saying, hey guys, slow down. Might not be what you expected.
Yeah, totally.
So Jews were faced with a very similar, especially after the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is, right, so the temple's destroyed in 70 AD,
mm-hmm.
but then the Bar Kokhba revolt is the Jews rise up and they anoint a Messiah, Simon Bar Kokhba.
Yeah.
What does that mean? They anoint him. They proclaim that he is the king of Israel.
Yeah. And Akiva was big in that too. Right?
Rabbi Akiva thought he proclaimed him the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And in what sense was he king of Israel? Well, he defeated the Roman army. That was the Jewish expectation.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they say in Luke 24, they're walking on the road to the Emmaus and they're sad. And Jesus, who they don't know who he is,
Yeah.
Says, "Why are you sad?" And he said, "We thought he was going to redeem Israel."
Yeah.
What did that mean to them? What that meant to the disciples of Jesus before the road to Emmaus was that, well, he was going to defeat the Roman army and rule as a flesh and blood king.
Yeah.
And then a new thing is revealed to them in Luke 24, right?
Here.
But up until that, I mean, the other Jews, Paul is struggling with this idea of the dead in Christ, right? Which people who have died before Jesus came back.
Yeah.
And people are like, what's going on? We thought it was going to be really soon.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't what we signed up for.
Yeah.
And he's, there's some profound teachings he has there, like, saying, hey guys, slow down. This might not be what you expected.
Yeah, totally.
So Jews were faced with a very similar, especially after the Bar Kokhba revolt, which is, right, so the temple's destroyed in 70 AD,
Mm-hmm.
but then the Bar Kokhba revolt is the Jews rise up and they anoint a Messiah, Simon Bar Kokhba.
Yeah.
So the Jews anoint a Messiah. So the Jews actually anoint a Messiah.
What does that mean? They anoint him. They proclaim that he is the king of Israel.
Yeah. And Akiva was big in that too. Right?
Rabbi Akiva thought he proclaimed him the king of Israel.
Yeah.
And in what sense was he king of Israel? Well, he defeated the Roman army. That was the Jewish expectation.
Yeah.
Right? It's like they say in Luke 24, they're walking on the road to the Emmaus and they're sad. And Jesus, who they don't know who he is, says, why are you sad? And he said, we thought he was going to redeem Israel.
Yeah.
What did that mean to them? What that meant to the disciples of Jesus before the road to Emmaus was that, well, he was going to defeat the Roman army and rule as a flesh and blood king.
Yeah.
And then a new thing is revealed to them in Luke 24, right?
Yeah.
But up until that, I mean, the other Jews still can, to this day, have that expectation.
Well, it's like what the disciples asked even the resurrected Jesus, which is, are you now going to establish your throne in Jerusalem? Like,
what are we waiting for?
Yeah, why?
Right? If you can do this, why are you not defeating the Romans?
It would have been mind-boggling for them that wouldn't be the next step.
It was definitely mind-boggling. Right? It basically says that in the New Testament.
Yeah. That
this is a big shock. Hey, the world's not going to go as you thought it would.
Yeah.
And the other Jews are still, to this day, this is the Jewish expectation.
Yeah.
What are we waiting for as Jews for the Messiah? We're waiting for world peace, ingathering of the exiles, and defeating the enemies. Right? You can't get world peace until you defeat our enemies.
Yeah.
Right? Evidently, from what I've seen on the news recently, our enemies have not been defeated and still want to wipe us out.
Yes.
There's this profound Jewish song that people recite during traditionally during the Passover Seder. And it goes something like, in every generation, they rose up to wipe us out. And Jews have been reciting this for centuries, for over 1,000 years. And it's mind-boggling. I mean, how can you not believe in God when you have these prophecies, when I read them in Deuteronomy, that there are these prophecies about being scattered amongst the nations and these persecutions. And then we see them not just in the black and white movies in history, we see them in our lifetimes.
Totally.
So, I mean, to me, this is the hand of God in history.
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people the greatest evidence that I have that the God of the Bible is the one true God is the continued persecution and redemption of the Jewish people all throughout history. Mm-hmm. It's like that is the narrative of Scripture, is that he's going to keep his people, and the enemy's always going to try to attack them and rise up a Haman to exterminate them.
So in Israel and Jerusalem, they have this museum. I'm sure you've been to it, Yad Vashem.
Yeah,
it's the National Holocaust Memorial. And there are these different displays. Last time I was there, at least, I don't know if they've changed it. There was this display where they have quotes from the Nazis. And one of the quotes is, "The chosen people are on the train to Auschwitz," something like that.
Wow.
And you're like, okay, I know he's being sarcastic.
Yeah.
But he on some level knows that there is good and there's evil. He thinks he's good.
Yeah.
Right? Those are on the side who are on the side of, I'll use Christian terms. Those who are on the side of Satan think they're good.
Mm-hmm.
But they understand there's another side.
Yeah.
And they're fighting against that other side.
Yeah.
And to imagine, I mean, this literally happens, that a Nazi would send a communique that the chosen people are on the trains
Yeah.
being sent to their deaths,
Yeah.
and to use that terminology, even if it's in a sarcastic way. I mean, it reminds me of, when the high priest says, the death of one man will bring redemption for the people, or something like that. Not realizing what he said,
Yeah.
but on some level, maybe realizing what he said.
Yeah. Yeah. Whether it's subconscious, whether it's the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit, or whether he knew.
I mean, it's
true.
what a profound reality we live in, and this isn't just history; it's happening today.
Yeah.
So, so back to the name. So there was external persecution and internal persecution,
Yeah.
and it was never intended to be forever. Meaning, within the rabbinical sources themselves, when they say it's forbidden to speak the name, and if you do, you lose your portion in the world to come, they also say, well, that's only a temporary measure.
Yeah.
Until the world to come, which hopefully will be soon. And even today I could say, hopefully will be soon.
Yeah.
Here on earth, that is. And I believe Christians have a similar idea of the second coming and the millennial kingdom, right? So, well, what is that name in the world to come?
Yeah.
So, so the Christian, or let's go, not necessarily Christian, but the attitude of Christian Hebraists, who are these scholars who are like, okay, we've thrown off the yoke of the Catholic Church, right? This is how it happened. It was part of the Protestant Reformation. Was people said, well, we should actually read the Bible. Well, how do we read the Bible? We don't know Latin. Okay, let's translate it. All right, what do we translate it from? And Martin Luther famously, there's this great quote from Martin Luther. I quoted in one of my books. And he says that if I were younger, I would learn Hebrew. It's the best language of all. And he has this beautiful.
Ironic.
What's that? It's ironic because
what he did later.
He started out as a lover of Jews.
Totally.
And then about 10 years later, he wrote a book called The Jews and Their Lies, in which he lays out a plan which becomes the Holocaust.
Yeah.
But early on, he loved the Jews.
Yeah, his other book, the one he wrote early on, I think was called Jesus Born a Jew. And it was all about the Jewishness of Jesus.
So he underwent a transformation for whatever reason. But at one point in his life, he said, if I were younger, I would want to learn Hebrew. It's the best language of all. Wow. And he has this beautiful parable. He says the Hebrew is the source, the spring. And I hope I'm getting this right. I think he says the Greek is the river that flows from the spring, and Latin is a downstream puddle.
Wow.
Right. And that makes you wonder, okay, then what's German for him and
English for us,
right?
Yeah.
So the Protestant reformers understood they needed to get back to the sources, and they started learning Hebrew. Not Martin Luther per se.
Yeah.
He knew a little bit of Hebrew.
Yeah.
But there were people even in his time who started to study Hebrew systematically. And at first they're learning from Jews, but eventually they developed what becomes the modern academic study over centuries of the Hebrew language. And when I went to the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, we studied the writings of a Christian Hebraist, Wilhelm Gesenius, who is one of the great, really scholars, one of the people who really established Hebrew linguistics, biblical Hebrew linguistics as a study.
Okay.
And so for centuries, the Christians are trying to figure out what are the rules of Hebrew, and how do we pronounce that name? How do we pronounce the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh? And they debate this for centuries. And there's this great quote in the, I believe it's in the 1600s. It's a Christian in England, and he said the pronunciation of that name is the anvil upon which everybody beats their hammer. Right? Everybody's got an opinion, and we just don't know. Now, why don't we know? We don't know because the Jews stopped pronouncing it, and the Jews themselves don't know how to pronounce it. Right? This is their and they quote in particular Moses Maimonides, who was a rabbi in the 12th century. He died in 1204 in Egypt, right? So the beginning of the 13th century. And he makes this statement that, how do we pronounce that name? That name is basically, he says something to the effect of, it's a secret. And you don't know what the vowels are, because the vowels of the name are not the vowels of that name, but the vowels of Adonai. Right? That's basically the gist of what he says.
Yeah.
And if those are the vowels, and there is a precedent for that we can go into if you want, that there are certain words, you can call them euphemisms, right? What's a euphemism? It's instead of saying a bad word, I say a good word, right? I'll say, oh my goodness, instead of oh my God, right? God's not a bad word.
Or Adam knew his wife. Wink, wink, right?
Right. So there's an example in biblical Hebrew of a euphemism.
Yeah.
right? That's a great example. Adam knew his wife, right?
Yeah.
It's new in an intimate sense, but it means they had relations.
Yeah.
Even relations.
That's a
is
euphemism.
Exactly,
They had sex.
right?
Yes.
Exactly. I explained one euphemism with another euphemism.
Yeah.
So there are euphemisms in the Hebrew Bible, meaning there are words written in the Hebrew text. If you take a Torah scroll out of the ark in the synagogue and you scroll to certain verses, you'll find there's a word that's written one way, but when they read it a different way.
Really?
Yeah.
Other than
100%.
I didn't know that.
No, not Adonai. There's other words. I can
Wow.
tell you what they are. They're not bad words. One of them is a bad word, which I can't say probably on this program. And instead of that word, it says the word lay, to lay with.
Okay.
Right. And that word, the actual explicit word, is there in the Hebrew text. But nobody reads it that way for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But and here's the point: when they did write down the vowels in the 600s, they wrote the vowels of the way the word is read, not the way it's written.
Okay.
So, in other words, you'll see a word with impossible vowels, and some of them aren't euphemism; they're like linguistic, like variants, right?
Yeah.
So, there's a word for "we" in Hebrew, which is
Interesting.
So the vowels of Adonai would be A, O, A. And the vowels in the name Yud He Vav He are Yeva. But in some manuscripts, it's Yehovah. But in when I can't say no manuscripts, because I found a few manuscripts where it does have the actual vowels of Adonai, and that's what scholars call the exception that teaches the rule. Right? So if the scribes wanted to write the vowels of Adonai, they knew how to do it. How do I know that? Because sometimes they did,
Yeah.
right? In a handful of manuscripts, they did.
Okay.
But in most manuscripts, there's different vowels. And if you look at what Jewish rabbis said about this, so there's this great debate that takes place in 1608 between these two rabbis.
Okay.
And this is something I discovered. I discovered it because I was told no Jew ever said they knew how to pronounce the name. And
It was told that.
I was told that.
Oh, you were told
and
that. Okay.
I thought that. I taught that.
Yeah.
The Jews didn't know how to pronounce. Well, here's what I taught. That no Jewish rabbi ever revealed how to pronounce the name. We only know it from the manuscripts of the Bible. I taught that.
Okay.
The rabbis did know. And how do I know they knew? Because in the Talmud, when it says you're not allowed to speak the name, it also says that rabbis would teach the name to their disciples once every 7 years.
So they knew it, but they were not saying.
The name so the knowledge wouldn't be lost.
Yeah.
And Maimonides doesn't actually say no one knows how to pronounce the name. This passage that the Christian Hebrewists are quoting from Maimonides just says most people don't know how to pronounce the name. He doesn't say no one knows.
Got it.
Right? Well, did he know? I don't know if he knew or not.
Yeah.
He probably didn't know. But there were people who did know. And there are these rabbis who I found, I have a teaching called 10 Rabbis Speak on the Name, and it turns out there's more than 10. But there's a debate in 1608 between these two rabbis. They're sending letters to each other and debating a certain point. They're actually debating how to pronounce the word Adonai, which means Lord.
Yeah.
Right? Because even that is debated. But what they agree on is those vowels in Yud He Vav He are the vowels of the name itself. And the one rabbi says, well, those vowels are for the world to come. When the Messiah reigns here on earth as a flesh and blood king, Jews will pronounce that name, Yehovah. Right? He names the vowels, Shvach Olam Kamatz, those are the names of the vowels.
Yeah.
And the other rabbi says, no, those vowels are now because they're the same vowels as Adonai, which he believed was supposed to be pronounced Edonai, right? But so, in other words, the other rabbi was saying, no, those are the vowels both of that name, Yud He Vav He, and the title. Right? When you say Adonai, you're wrong. That's not how to pronounce it, or at least in certain instances. Let's say. So, but they're agreeing that the vowels of the name Yud He Vav He are Yehovah, which is really interesting because it's a fact. And when I do the teaching, I tell the audience, say fact, say common knowledge, the vowels of the name Yud He Vav He are the vowels of Adonai. But in fact, those are not the vowels, number one. And number two, there are Jewish rabbis who knew and believed. You could say they were wrong. So here's a fact, right?
Yeah.
They believed that those vowels, Yehovah, were the actual vowels of that name. Now, where do we get Yahweh? Ooh, that's interesting. So there is a Christian church father named Theodoret of Cyrus, and he is in the 5th century AD.
Okay.
And he says the Jews pronounced the Tetragrammaton Ayah, and the Samaritans pronounced it Yahweh. And scholars, Christian Hebrewists, saw this, and they said, okay, the Jews didn't know how to.
You about to close out?
Right, because what's Ayah?
I'm not. No. You got something coming up.
Right,
Let's
so that's
teach
probably
them.
I will be your hand.
No, you had the music. Cut the
The
music
Samaritans, well, they didn't have a prohibition to
Can't hear
speak
the
the
video.
name, so they must have been pronouncing it Yahweh.
I was just coming
And
up here
what
to
is
learn.
Yahweh in
See what
Hebrew?
you was
Yahweh.
teaching today.
Well, in ancient Hebrew,
for
it's
sure.
believed it wouldn't have been Yahweh; it would have been Yahweh. Right, the H would be pronounced Yahweh.
Yeah.
And that's so. In other words, that's a reconstruction from a Christian church father in the 5th century, quoting a Samaritan, and then reconstructing back into actual Hebrew what a Samaritan would have meant. Right. So there's a lot of steps here.
Yeah,
right?
we jumped through a lot of hoops.
Right. One of the problems is the Samaritans stopped speaking the name way before the Jews.
Interesting.
Yeah. So the Samaritans actually don't speak the name. They call God Shema, which is Aramaic for the name. So when they read in the 10 Commandments, where God says, Anochi Yehovah Elohecha asher hotziticha me'eretz Mitzrayim, I am Yehovah, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, they read the name Yud He Vav He. And by the way, they don't pronounce the letters Yud He Vav He, because the Vav they pronounce as a B, which is interesting. That shows they didn't pronounce it as a W, they pronounced it as a V.
Yeah.
But when they read the letters Yud He Vav He, the Samaritans pronounce that as Shema, which is a replacement for the name, meaning in Aramaic, the name.
It's kind of like Hashem.
It's exactly Hashem, but Hashem's Hebrew, Shema is Aramaic.
Got it.
And there's evidence that, or it's guaranteed that by the 5th century, when Theodoret says this, they were not speaking the name.
Hmm.
So in other words, he would have had to have some tradition going back, I don't know, hundreds of years, probably 5 or 6 centuries. In other words, he didn't hear it from the Samaritan high priest.
Yeah.
If he's reporting a genuine tradition, he heard it from someone who 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 heard it, and add that several more times from someone who heard it from the Samaritan.
So it's a shaky foundation to say
it's very
Yahweh.
shaky.
And we talked about this kind of jokingly earlier. A lot of Christians will today say Yahweh is the very breath of God. When you breathe, you say Yahweh. And so you're saying the name of God every time you breathe. Where'd that come from?
I think some guy on the internet made that up. I don't know who made that up.
You've heard it. Have you heard?
I've heard
Christians
it. I
say
heard that like many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And the way it was presented was, well, there are certain Native American chants where they are saying something that sounds like to them like Yahweh, and it's part of a breathing process. And no, I don't know if that is. I don't know anything enough about Native American. I was told this by a Native American, by the way.
Got it.
So I don't know if that is the source of it or not.
Yeah.
And his point was,
but that's not that's not an ancient Jewish source.
Not that I'm aware of. No, the source I'm aware of is Jews are saying, and there are actually 3 different pronunciation in Jewish sources, but the most common, widespread one, and it's interesting because when they're discussing it, they're saying this is a secret, don't tell anybody, is that it's Yehovah.
So if it is Yehovah, and they didn't want to say it, because it was looked at as, whether it was the magic or whether it was the persecutions, and then later developed into just a reverence,
respect and honor.
Then why would you put the vowels there to say it?
So that's interesting. So in the early manuscripts, they leave out one of the vowels.
Okay.
And you might say, oh no, well maybe it just has 2 vowels. Well, it can't. And I could go into the rules of biblical Hebrew, but basically, based on the rules of biblical Hebrew, there's a vowel missing.
That was their insurance of not saying it.
That was the way to probably prevent people from accidentally pronouncing it. Okay. Even if you see those vowels, you won't pronounce it because there's a vowel left out.
Yeah.
And one of the really cool things is sometimes they did put in the full vowel. So, but I feel like that's a whole separate discussion to do justice to that. I don't want anybody to take away from this that, oh, it's evil to say Yahweh. Nehemiah is rebuking us and judging us, and we shouldn't say Yahweh. I say to people, work it out for yourself in fear and trembling with prayer and study before the creator of the universe. Yeah. And we have this beautiful verse in Psalm 44. In the Hebrew, it's verses 20 to 21. I want to say in the, or maybe it's 19 to 20, right? In the King James and the Hebrew, it's slightly different verses. But it's there around verses 20, 21, 22 in the different versions. And it's a beautiful passage. It says, it talks about the Jews being sent into exile, they're scattered among the nations. And it says, if we raise our hands to a foreign God, raise our hands and call upon the name of a foreign God, you will search it out in our hearts. And what it's saying is, look, in exile in Babylon, where we were sent into the Babylonian exile, there's people who 2-3 generations in, they don't even remember the name of God. They're calling on, where this is like Daniel, right? He has all these different gods he's told to worship, and his 3 companions. And so a few generations in, they're calling on Marduk and they're calling on Bel and these different Babylonian deities. But in their hearts, they mean Yehovah. And God is that merciful, we're told there, that he can look in our hearts. And that's, I think that's, from a Jewish perspective, that's grace. Because I don't deserve it. I'm calling on the wrong name. Yeah. And he still can have mercy on me. Yeah, knowing. So I don't think we should be more judgmental than God. At the same time, look, I'm obsessed with truth. I have autism. And part of that is an obsession with biblical truth, what I understand is biblical truth. Yeah. And so I just want to know what the truth is, the historical and biblical truth. Yeah. And the historical and biblical truth, the best information I have currently is that it's Yehovah. Could it be Yahweh? Sure, anything's possible. It could be, and I say jokingly to people, it could be Yuhu Vuhu, but it's actually not a joke. It really could be Yuhu Vuhu. And I have actually found, this is not a joke, I found more Hebrew Jewish manuscripts with Yuhu Vuhu than I have with Yahweh. And that's not a joke. Now, those are Kabbalistic texts where they're saying these are meditations, not how you should pronounce it. Yeah. But I don't find any Kabbalistic meditations with Yahweh. Yeah. That didn't even come into their minds, so which is interesting. So at least I haven't found those. Maybe they're out there. Yeah. Or maybe there's one I did see at Cambridge University, but that's one out of, now that I think about it. There might be one with Yahweh. But Yuhu Vuhu is actually quite common, believe it or not. I don't think it was Yuhu Vuhu, because that doesn't really fit it with other. Well, here's the most important part to me. One of the most important parts. What does the name actually mean?
Yeah.
Leave aside how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
How it's pronounced informs what it means, and vice versa. So what it means in Jewish sources is Haya, he was, Hoveh, he is, and Yihiyeh, he will be. And there's this, I recently did a teaching on this. There is an ancient Jewish translation to Aramaic where they paraphrase it. And for he will be, they explain as in the future, he will come. Right? So he was, he is, and he will come. Does that sound familiar from anywhere?
Revelation.
That's absolutely Revelation.
Yeah.
And specifically, it's a number of verses in Revelation. One of the passages, it's the same vision that Isaiah saw in chapter 6, where he sees the angels saying, Kadosh, 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 holy, 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 in Greek, Hagios, Hagios, Hagios.
Yeah.
And then in Hebrew, it's Yehovah Tsevaot, Yehovah of hosts.
Yeah.
And that's the context in which it says something like the Lord Almighty, who was, is, and is to come.
Yeah.
Right? So in other words, and I'm not the first one to recognize this, there are Christian scholars who have realized, wait, that's Hayahoveh Hieh.
Yeah.
That's the meaning of the name Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yehovah. And Yehovah, that pronunciation was understood by Jews as, and here some scholars will say, well, the Jews didn't know. Okay. So you think the Jews didn't know what they were talking about. But the way it was understood by Jews is Hayahoveh Hieh, he was, is, and is to come, was then the explanation of the pronunciation Yehovah. Right? If you take the form he was, and he is to come in Hebrew, and you combine them, you take part of each of those words, you get Yehovah. And
is the proper understanding of what we would typically translate as I am.
So better? I am, it's complicated, and people have literally written PhD dissertations on the Hebrew verbal system, so we're not going to solve that here.
Yeah.
But basically, I am would be understood by most Jews today as I will be, but it's actually a bit more complicated. It really means I am now and continue to be into the future.
Yeah.
Right?
So
the verbal system is complicated in biblical Hebrew.
So it's not a far stretch to say the I am statement at the burning bush could be translated
100%.
I am who.
There's not a question that when the Hebrew it says Ehiyah, I will be, in the ancient Greek Septuagint. So here's the problem. The Greeks didn't have the same verbal system as Hebrew.
Yeah.
So when the Jews translated Exodus 3:14, Ehiyah asher ehiyah, into Greek, they translated Ehiyah as ego eimi, I am, which is what Jesus says. There's not a question. When Jesus says ego eimi, I am, he's alluding to, I think everyone accepts that.
Yeah.
He's alluding to Exodus 3:14.
You're talking about when he says before Abraham was,
I am. Ehiyah, I will be, right? So in other words, that's what it is in Greek, I am. But in Hebrew, it's a bit more nuanced. It's I am now and continue to be into the future. It's a repetitive action.
Yeah. And so it is very similar to I am. The one who is, the one who was, the one who is.
It's the Greek.
And it's kind of what we were talking about yesterday, A1, if you remember, about the difference between a verb and a noun, right? Slight nuances, right? A verb and a noun, where in the fullness of God's name, being he was, he is, and will to come. That's an action alluding to, future. It's still, it's a verb. The noun is where you're just making it into a common noun. It just means his name. It has no action to it. So when we see the tetragram, is what we're alluding to, what we're explaining within the Nakuts, where they're taking the vowel points from the word Adani and just inserting it into the skeleton. You've lost all meaning. You're just using it as a vocalization at this point. So that's kind of what they're talking about. Let me get back to it.
Equivalent of I am. Well, it's so that's the context. Exodus 3:14, God says, I am, or I will be, and I continue to be into the future. And then the very next verse, he says, my eternal name is Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh Yehovah.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's let's say it was not lost on the authors of the New Testament and the early Christians that the name Jesus means Yehovah Yoshia, he that was, is, and is to come saves, right? That's the meaning of the name Jesus back into Hebrew. I mean, it's the name of the Father, he will save.
Got it. That's so good. So as we now transition to the New Testament, I have a few New Testament questions regarding the name. But first, when the Hebrew scholars, or I guess maybe Greek scholars, but I think they were Jewish, translated the Old Testament from Hebrew to Greek, which we would call the Septuagint. Did they ever, I think the Greek word is Kyrios, which is Lord.
Yeah. Kyrios or Kurios, depending on your Greek dialect.
Okay. Did they ever put Yod He Vav He? Did they ever
that's
put,
interesting.
or was it always Kyrios?
So it was
Lord.
definitely not, well, it's hard to say anything definitely.
Yeah.
So the original Septuagint was translated around 250 BCE. We don't have a copy from 250 BCE. We have a copy from around 300 AD, so about 550 years later.
Because we would say that Jesus would have been familiar with the Septuagint, and the first century Jews would have been maybe familiar.
I would imagine when he read from Isaiah from the scroll in Capernaum,
he's reading Hebrew.
In Nazareth, he was reading from the Hebrew.
Totally, but not saying that they were speaking Greek, because I believe that Jesus was speaking Hebrew and would have been
certainly when he was reading from the scroll. There's no debate that he was.
But would there have been an understanding of the Septuagint?
So here's what we know today after about 70, 80 years of the Dead Sea Scrolls being discovered.
Yeah. So
we know today, or what the evidence we have is all of our earlier copies, meaning anything before the let's say late 2nd century AD of the Septuagint, has one of two things. It has either Yud He Vav He written in Hebrew letters.
So it's Greek and then random Hebrew 4 letters.
Exactly. And I can show you a picture of it. You can throw it up on the screen. I can send it to you.
Love that.
And anybody not knowing a letter of Greek will say that's different.
Yeah, they just randomly changed.
All of a sudden,
the code changed.
Scribe wrote a different word, maybe a different scribe in some cases. Meaning maybe they left blank spaces and they were filled in some cases. But so there's a different script all of a sudden. They're writing Greek, and when they get to the name Yud He Vav He, they write the letters Yud He Vav He. And Origen, who was a church father who worked more in the Septuagint probably than anybody, he even probably did some revisions of the Septuagint, he says the most accurate manuscripts have the name written in ancient letters. Right? When they get to that name in the Greek text, they wrote Yud He Vav He. And then we have one Dead Sea Scroll where instead of Yud He Vav He, they write it with the Greek pronunciation, which is Ya'o. And Ya'o is almost certainly an abbreviated form of Yud He Vav He.
In Greek.
In Greek.
Wow.
They're writing Ya'o. And then there's some Aramaic evidence to point to that as well.
So these manuscripts where it's written in Greek and then there's a Hebrew Yod He Vav He, how late are those documents?
How late? So that's an interesting question. I mean, we have them, some of them are surprisingly late, but we also have early ones.
Okay.
Meaning we have ones that are from the Second Temple period. And then we also have stuff that might be as late as the 5th or 6th century, which is like, wait, you're still doing that?
Yeah, they're still continuing
after the Christian, and so those are almost certainly Jewish copies of the Septuagint.
Yeah.
I mean, the Christians had already swapped it out with Kyrios, and some Jews seem to be continuing to write Yud He Vav He in Paleo Hebrew letters.
Yeah.
And there's this really interesting statement by one of the church fathers who says that it's so bad when the Christians see Yud He Vav, and he's a Christian, right? He's saying when Christian scribes see Yud He Vav He in the Paleo Hebrew, in these ancient Hebrew characters, they don't know how to copy them. So they replace the Hebrew letters Yud He Vav He with the Greek letters Pi Yota, which is pronounced Pipi. And they literally have the word Pipi in there, right? They have a perfectly great Greek text in the Old Testament, and they get to the letters Yud He Vav He, and they're like, I don't know how to write those weird Hebrew letters.
Yeah.
And the He kind of looks like a pi, and the Yud and the Vav kind of look like a Yota, so Pi Yota. And so eventually they swap it out with Kyrios. And so what some scholars would say is what's called the Old Greek. The Old Greek is not the one we have today of the Septuagint, but let's say the earlier version of the Septuagint seems to have had the name Yud He Vav He written written in Paleo Hebrew characters, or some sort of Hebrew characters,
Yeah.
or some pronunciation such as Ya'o found in one of the Dead Sea Scrolls 4Q120.
Wow. So when the New Testament authors sit down and they're writing in Greek and maybe making allusions to a Septuagint.
Well, here's the really good one. When Peter in Acts 2 is quoting from Joel, and it says, all those who call upon the name of the Lord will be saved.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 questions. What did he say in Jerusalem
That
on
day.
Pentecost?
Yeah.
Did he say Adonai?
Yeah.
Did he say Kyrios? Did he say Yehovah? Did he say Yahweh?
Yeah.
And then what was written down?
Yeah.
Because maybe he said Adonai, but then they wrote it down as Yod He Vav He, because Jews pronounce that as Adonai, right? So these are questions we don't have the answer to, and I say work it out for yourself in fear and trembling when prayer and
But is it written as Kyrios?
It's written today as Kyrios, absolutely, in the earliest manuscripts.
And I know you do a lot of work with the ancient Hebrew New Testament. You know, there's some fragments of Revelation. There's the book of Matthew, the Hebrew Matthew. Is that all Kyrios?
I want to be careful in calling it the ancient Hebrew. Let's call it Hebrew witnesses to versions of the New Testament. Maybe they're translations from Greek or Latin in some cases.
Yeah.
Many of those have some representation of the name in Hebrew. Some actually have the letters Yud He Vav He.
Really?
Although those almost certainly came from Christian scribes.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning it could be a Christian translating from Latin or Greek and saying, well, I mean, I know obviously this would be Yud He Vav He in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And in other instances, it will have like the letter He, which is how rabbis would represent the name Yud He Vav He outside the Old Testament, which is like Hashem.
Yeah.
Right, representing the name.
Yeah.
So why didn't they just write Lord? So it could just be that they're like, okay, let's restore what originally was there. Or in some cases, and this is very controversial, maybe they're copying from some earlier source that preserves something in Hebrew.
Yeah. Because when I look at some of the writings in the New Testament, for example, a big one that we quote all the time, Romans 10:9, which is kind of like the Christian playbook of how do you get saved. It is believe in your heart that Jesus is Lord. And I'm like, wait.
So did he say
Kyrios?
That Jesus is
Adonai?
But in Hebrew, it's even more complex, because it could be one of 3 things: that Jesus is Yehovah, that Jesus is Adonai, or that Jesus is Adoni.
My Lord.
Right. Well, both Adonai and Adoni means my Lord. One is only used of God, and one would be used of humans or an angel. So which one did they say? And we don't know, right? That's a theological position that I'll leave for Christians to argue about and debate.
Yeah.
But the last word I want to say here, which is I think the most important thing, please don't take away from this that I've learned this new thing, it's Yehovah, and I'm going to beat my friends over the head with it. Please don't do that. Love your if you don't speak the name Yehovah in love and for unity and to find common ground, whether you're dealing with a Jew or a Christian, then that is a desecration of the name in my view. Yeah.
Well, I'd love to end, because it's one of the scriptures that we quote a lot, especially in the Messianic world. It's quoted a lot, which is, Yeshua saying to Jerusalem, "You will not see me again until you cry out, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai."
And that's a quote from Psalms, which is Baruch haba b'shem Yehovah.
Yeah.
Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah. And that's interesting, by the way. We talked earlier about the greeting of ancient Israel.
Yeah.
That was a greeting, right? In other words, the original context in Psalms is the Levites are standing at the entrance of the temple, and they say, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of Yehovah," meaning you're blessed in the name of Yehovah. And Jesus, Yeshua, takes that and reads a prophetic, messianic, Christological reading into it, saying, wait, there's a deeper meaning you guys might have missed, right? You had eyes, but you didn't see it. And the deeper meaning is not just you're being greeted like you do every day in the name of Yehovah, but there's one who is coming it's not just the blessing in the name of Yehovah, there's one who's coming in the name of Yehovah.
Yeah.
Which that's a pretty neat trick if you never use the name or I don't know.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Well, as we all go back to the scriptures and we read scriptures like, "In the name of the Lord we shall be saved," or the name of the Lord is a strong tower. Is this important for us to know if we're going to know God intimately? Is this important to know if there's going to be power in our prayers? Or is this a fun
So I don't want it
fact?
to be like a magical incantation,
Yeah,
but it's also not a
clearly.
fun fact. There's this beautiful scene where Melchizedek comes and he blesses Abraham, and he blesses him by the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
And this is in the presence of the king of Sodom. And Abraham hears this, and he must have been thinking, I know who Melchizedek is talking about, but there's also a Canaanite deity called the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth.
Mm.
And we're among Canaanites.
Yeah.
And so he responds to Melchizedek, and he adds the name Yehovah. He says, Yehovah, the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth.
Wow.
And his reason for doing that, it seems in the context there is, I know who you're talking about, you know who I'm talking about, but that guy over there, the king of Sodom, he don't know who we're talking about. So to remove the ambiguity, it's important that we be very specific and say, but who is the Most High God, creator of heaven and earth?
Yeah, man, that's good.
Imagine if you were in a Christian denomination where they said you cannot say the name Jesus. It's offensive to some Christians, so we're just going to call him God, or we're just going to call him the Son.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there could be a lot of confusion if you're in India where they have a God and they have gods who are son of God.
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, okay. Oh, you mean that, so-and-so, that's the son of God.
Yeah.
Well, no, we better be more specific and clarify who we mean in that case.
Well, thank you for doing all of the research that allows us to have this conversation, the research that 99% of people would never do because it is just years and years of trudging and getting manuscripts. Like, you're doing the hard work, you're plowing.
So this was just a quick video. I just wanted to get some insight. I actually wanted to have a discussion with the brother Kassar today. I hit him up. He said he had to work today. So the panel is open for a moment. You can jump on, comment, share about the video, add on, build. If not, we're going to shut it down. I was on for a little while, almost a couple hours. So that's really out my time.
Number one, the vowel in the full name Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh, is it a vowel or is it a consonant? So this is the letter we're talking about. This is the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh in the block letters. And this is the vowel. Is it a vowel or a consonant in the correct pronunciation of the full name Yod-Heh-Waw-Heh? And by the way, we say the four consonants of the Creator's name, just to distinguish the letters from the vowel points. But this does not deny that some of these letters might indeed be vowel letters. Okay? So remember this quote from the Jewish Virtual Library saying the correct pronunciation of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, we no longer know it with any certainty. We do not know what vowels were used, or even whether the vav in the name was a vowel or a consonant. But today we're going to use the evidence from the Hebrew Bible to answer this question. And first of all, we'll answer the question about the vowel. So how are we going to answer this question? We need to understand some basics about Hebrew grammar and the vowels and how the vowel points represent the vowels. And then we're going to use Hebrew grammar plus the root, ayah, plus the shortened forms. We're going to put the evidence together and answer this question about the vowel. So let's talk about Hebrew vowel points and how these Hebrew vowel points teach us about Hebrew grammar. You might be wondering, why are we using these vowel points if they were only invented in the Middle Ages? It's because these vowel points capture the traditional reading of the Bible, and these vowel points give us the most accurate representation of Hebrew vowel patterns and Hebrew grammar that we have. Not even Latin or Greek transliteration is as meticulous as this vowel pointing system. So, first of all, the large characters you can see here on the screen are the consonants and the vowel letters. And then these little dots and lines are the vowel points and accents. Okay, so the vowel points and the accents tell us how to correctly pronounce the text. Just keep in mind, with the full name Yod-Heh-Wah-Heh, the correct pronunciation is Adonai. That's why we can't just say, oh, there's the true vowels on the name. That's why we need to use the short form Yahu plus Hebrew grammar to find the true pronunciation. So what can we learn from these vowel points? We can learn, for example, that Hebrew words don't begin in vowels. They begin in consonants. There's only one exception to this rule, and that is the conjunction wow, which is sometimes pronounced as oo. So go back to video number 6 to learn when it is pronounced as oo, but that's the only vowel that a Hebrew word can begin with. Okay? Even words that seem to begin in vowels really begin in consonants. Like this word asher doesn't begin with a, it begins with the guttural aleph, then the vowel a. And the same with the name Job, which in Hebrew is Iyov. It begins with an aleph, then the e. All right? So every Hebrew word begins with a consonant except for this wow, which is sometimes pronounced oo. That's the exception. Something else that we see here is that every consonant at the beginning and in the middle of the word, of any Hebrew word, has a vowel sign attached to it. Only some consonants at the end of a word stand without any vowel sign. So in the middle of a word, even when a consonant has no vowel pronounced with it, it still has a vowel sign on it. That's how meticulous this system is. For example, this word, uvazar aha, this reish has no vowel on it, and it's got this simple or silent shua underneath it, indicating there's no vowel on the reish. Now, because this vowel pointing system is so precise, we can learn even more. For example, we learned there's a very definite pattern of consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel, and so on. In other words, you cannot have two vowels in a row in the middle of a Hebrew word. And the only exception to this rule is the patach furtive, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But the point is, you have consonant, vowel, and so on. So you can't just have two vowels in a row. You can sometimes have two consonants in a row without a vowel in between, but never two vowels in a row without a consonant in between, except for the patach furtive. Okay, something else you might be wondering about is a word like leot. It sounds as if there are two vowels, but in reality, it's still the same pattern of consonant, vowel, consonant, vowel. You see there's an aleph in between the le and the o, leot. There's a guttural aleph in between. Okay, so no two vowels in a row. Now, one last thing before we get to this argument about the wow. You always pronounce the consonant first and then the vowel attached to it. And then the consonant first and then the vowel associated with it. And so on. And again, the only exception is the patach furtive. Now, if we have this basic understanding of Hebrew grammar, we can work out which vowels are consonants and which vowels are vowels or vowel letters, because you can't have two vowels in a row. So, if we look at this wow here, is that wow a vowel letter or is it a consonant? Oh, it's very easy. Just look what precedes this vowel. We have a tsade here at the beginning of the word, and it is pointed with a chilak. So you pronounce that tsi, tsi, and then you can't have another vowel next to it. You can't have two vowels in a row. So this is not tsi-u. This is a consonantal vowel. And this dot inside it doesn't show it's a shulak. It actually shows that this is a doubled consonant. This is a doubling dagesh. Okay? This is not tsi-u, this is tsi-u. Pronounce that well. Then underneath the vowel, there's another vowel. There's a kametz. This is not tsi-u-ak. This is tsi-u-wak. You cannot pronounce E, then U, then A without consonants in between. So it's very simple. We cannot have two vowels in a row. So let's just talk about the patach furtive. The patach furtive is a unique exception to this rule saying you can't have two vowels in a row. And it only occurs at the end of a word next to a final guttural. So, for example, this word at the top is pronounced wegavoah. You pronounce this hey at the end as a guttural hey. That's why it's got a dot inside it called a mapik. And so the problem here is this is an infinitive absolute, a special form of the verb. And the vowel pattern for the infinitive absolute is or in the kal conjugation. So you have the here, you have the or there, but you can't properly pronounce a guttural at the end of a word unless it is preceded by an A-class vowel. According to the Masoritic system, you must have an A-class vowel preceding every final guttural letter. So here comes an helping in between the o and the guttural hey. Gavoa. And you pronounce these two vowels in a row, and you also pronounce this patach before its guttural hey. So this is a very unique exception. And at the bottom we have bishloach. Bishloach. And again, there's this patach furtive. It only occurs next to a final guttural letter. A guttural hey, chet, or ayin. Okay? So when we look at the name Yodei Waw Hey, we know that that final hey is not a guttural hey. We know it is a vowel letter hey. We talked about this in part A, where we saw the root of the name is haya. And we won't go through the evidence again, but the hey in the root haya is a vowel letter hey, not a guttural hey, not a consonantal hey. So in other words, if we know this final hey in the name Yodei Waw Hey is a vowel letter and not a guttural, then we know there can't be a patach furtive in the name Yodei Waw Hey, which means we cannot have two vowels in a row in the name Yodei Waw Hey. And also remember that the vowel letter hey is only used with three vowels. As in Samla, O as in Shlomo, and E as in Menashe. And the E has the variant A, and we'll talk more about that later. So the point is, we have a vowel letter at the end of the name, but we can't precede this vowel letter with U. So you can't just take Yahoo and add the vowel letter Hey to the end and make this Hey the vowel letter of an U, because the vowel letter Hey is never used with an U. And neither can you have two vowels in a row. And unfortunately, many people don't understand this. And that's
kind of funny because I see that a lot in the Hebrews, and especially how they spell that name. That last ha. So he's saying that this is a consonant, right? It's a H, right? But it's pronounced ha. So that's the danger with this Tiberian vocalization system, right? You're not vocalizing what is actually written, right? So you have to actually speak what we read. So this ha here, what they would do is they're adding a H for the ha, or the hey, and they're adding a U, a vowel. They're adding a vowel after this, which you can't do. And then they add an A and a U, Yaheyu. Or for Josh, Yeshua, they add a U and an A. They'll spell it out. Or hey, A-U, Yua. Or they add it's just a bunch of made up Yiddish bullshit. Let's go.
That's why many teachers come up with the names Yahuwah, etc. Because they take Yahoo and they say, okay, it's obvious that we need another vowel at the end because in Yahoo the last hey is missing. Okay, so we add this vowel letter hey, and then we squeeze in another vowel there between the u and the hey at the end, and we make Yahuwah or Yahuwah or Yahuwai or whatever. And the problem here is you can't have two vowels in a row. You can't just have u and then ah. That is only possible next to a guttural hey. It's not possible next to a vowel letter hey. It's not possible in the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Hey. Okay, now what if you write it this way? We don't put two vowels in a row, we put the vowel on the last hey. You can't do that because this hey is a vowel letter. But if you write it this way, it would be pronounced Yahu-ha, not Yahuwah, because you pronounce the consonant first and then the vowel. So this is not possible. We can't even have a vowel on that final hey. That hey as a vowel letter can only form part of the preceding vowel. Another argument that people use is they say, no, you take the name Yehuda, and they pronounce that name Yahuda. They say you just take away the dalet out of that name, and instead of Yahuda, you have Yahuwah. But that is really a lot of nonsense, because where in the Bible can you show me an example where you take a word, you just take out one consonant, you leave behind two vowels in a row, and that makes a name? That doesn't happen in the Bible. You cannot have two vowels in a row. And the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Hey is not formed from the name Yehuda. Refer to part A of this study for a proper explanation of how the name Yehuda is formed in the Hebrew language. And then one last try here. Some people say it's Yahuwah. You have U, then W, and then A. So you have a consonant in between. But how do you write that in Yod-Heh-Waw-Hey? Because they get the U from Yahoo, from this vowel letter, and now they want this vowel to be both a vowel letter and a consonant at the same time. But that never occurs in the entire Hebrew Bible. No vowel is both a vowel letter and a consonant at the same time. That cannot happen. So basically, we've established that because this final hey is a vowel letter, and it cannot be preceded by u, we know this vowel in the name Yod-Heh-Waw-Hey is a consonant. And with this consonant, you pronounce another vowel to accompany this vowel letter hey. There is no other option because you cannot have two vowels in a row. Okay? Now, you might ask, now how is it possible that in the full name Yod-Heh-Waw-Hey, this vowel is a consonant, but in the short form Yahoo, it's a vowel? How is that possible? Let's just look at a quick example, and we'll talk more about this later. But there's nothing wrong with this idea in terms of Hebrew grammar. Let me show an example where in the full uncontracted form of a word, the vowel is a consonant, and in the contracted form, it's a vowel. This word at the top is pronounced Yishtachaweh. This vowel is a consonantal vowel because it is preceded by a vowel and it is followed by a vowel. So you can't have a, u, e. You can't have three vowels in a row. Okay? So this is a consonantal vowel with segol hey at the end. This vowel accompanies the vowel letter hey at the end. Okay, now what happens when this word contracts and it shortens up? And by the way, when do Hebrew words tend to contract? They often contract when the emphasis moves back to an earlier syllable. The last syllable loses the emphasis and it shortens up. So look what happens here. We have Wayishtahu. Now this wa at the beginning is just then or so. And yishtahu is the same word as yishtachaweh, except that the emphasis moved back to the preceding syllable. A compound vowel cannot make a syllable. So that's not the preceding syllable. That's the preceding syllable before the e at the end. It moves back to this syllable. And you have yishtahu. And here in the short form, the wow is a vowel. This is perfect Hebrew grammar. So you can't just say that because in the short form we have an u at the end, yishtahu, that u proves the full pronunciation of the uncontracted form is yishtahua or yishtahue. That doesn't work that way because you cannot have two vowels or three vowels in a row in the Hebrew language. So some people say, no, but Josephus proves these are all vowels. Josephus said the name consists of 4 vowels. So let's read this quote and talk about the argument. A mitre also of fine linen encompassed his head, which was tied by a blue ribbon, about which there was another golden crown, in which was engraven the sacred name. It consists of 4 vowels. So people say, well, there you have it. The name is 4 vowels, and then they pronounce I-A or E or I-E or A, and they say that's the true name. But remember, you can't even have 2 vowels in a row in the Hebrew language. How can you have 4 vowels in a row? So what is Josephus really talking about? And then some people also quote Jerome, where Jerome says it doesn't matter whether you say Shalem or Shalim, because the vowels are rarely used. And people say, oh, this proves the vowel points existed at the time of Jerome. Oh, this proves the vowels or the vowel points existed at the time of Josephus. But what are they really talking about? They are really talking about vowel letters. Vowel letters. And they use these vowel letters to indicate vowels before the vowel point system was used. So let me show you the name Yod-Heh. The Yod is used as a vowel letter in other words. The Hey is used as a vowel letter in other words. And even the Wow is used as a vowel letter. So let's look at some examples. This Yod in the word Hayita is a vowel letter. This Wow in the word Uve-Iwaron and this Wow at the end are vowel letters. This Hey in the word Yakacha is a vowel letter. So what Josephus is saying is that each and every letter in the Creator's name is a letter that is used as a vowel in the 1st century. As we saw in the Dead Sea Scrolls from Qumran, they use these vowel letters everywhere, even in places where it's not found in the Masoritic text. They use the Yod, the Hey, and the Wow to indicate vowels. So that is all Josephus is talking about. And the same with Jerome. He talks about the vowel letter Yod. Do you write Shalem with or without the vowel letter Yod? That's what they're talking about. So what can we prove with this quote of Josephus? If someone says to me, no, the name is not Yod-Heh, it's Yod-Chet-Wah-Heh, then I'll say, no, Josephus said it's 4 vowels. Each of these letters in the Creator's name must be a letter that is used to indicate a vowel in the Hebrew language at the time of Josephus. Okay, that's all this quote is about. This does not prove that 4 vowels can exist in a row in the Hebrew language. So the last Hey is a vowel letter. The preceding vowel must be a consonant. Now, how about the other letters here? While we're on the topic, is this first Hey in the name Yod-Heh a vowel letter, or is it a consonant? I've heard some people say this Hey is a vowel letter. It's silent. Now, the problem is this name derives from the root Haya. And in Haya, the first Hey is a consonant, not a vowel letter. And the root Haya, even just by itself, actually gives the answer to the wow. Okay, is this wow a vowel or a consonant? This vowel derives from the yod in the root haya. In the root haya, that yod never becomes a vowel if it is still in the middle of a word. It can only
And that's an amazing point that he's making. But we got to get up out of here, Titans fans and family. So, as your host, King J, I've watched you strike with precision as a Tiberian scribe, just as the Masorites place every Nakul to ensure the truth could be misread. Today, you have anchored your arguments in the bedrock of logic. The scroll for today is closed. I am King J, and this is the Titans Debate League. Keep your accents sharp and your truth preserved. Good night.